of mixed emotions about this one. Last night I saw the highly anticipated Civil War, written and directed by Alex Garland, in IMAX at an advanced screening, and Civil War is a new movie from Alex Garland. If you're familiar with his work, you know Ex Machina, Annihilation, Sunshine, 28 Days Later. These are some of my all-time favorite movies, and I was definitely curious to watch this movie, but the idea of seeing an American Civil War depicted on screen, I really thought, I don't need this. I really don't need this. So I can't say I was excited about it. And if you are considering watching this movie, just heed my warning that it is graphic, it is gruesome, and it is so loud. Like, if you haven't invested in a pair of earplugs, like, I feel like this movie sent me over the edge. I need to definitely invest in a set of earplugs if I want to continue watching movies in IMAX, because this movie takes the word immersive way literally, and you are entrenched in war scenes for extended periods of time, and it is really loud. What I'm about to say might be really upsetting for like diehard Alex Garland fans or people who are really into movies like this. I just, typically Alex Garland and I are like this, at least with the 4 movies that I mentioned. I leave feeling like I understood or connected with the material. With Civil War in particular, this is just a movie, like, even seeing the trailers, I kind of felt like, who is this for? And even watching it now, it's really tough. I don't think it was for me, but it could be for other people, and that's fine. I think just looking at the way that the story is framed, without giving too much away, this is just looking at the synopsis. It's framed from the point of view of journalists who are entrenched in war times, and because they have to take a level of distance from their subjects, I feel like the movie is very purposely putting you in a space where you have a lot of distance with these characters. You're not really connecting with them in the same way that you would in a typical narrative movie. And for that experimentation in a movie of this size like this, I think that's fantastic. But I don't think I need a movie to make me scared of being in America right now. It seems so dystopian to be able to walk into a theater, pay my dollars to watch a movie that is showing me the horrors of the world that are happening right now in other places. I don't know what that is revealing to me about what I need from a movie. I don't need every movie to spoon feed me lessons of morality or be very blatant in like the stories it's trying to tell, but I feel like I didn't enjoy this movie. I don't think I was meant to enjoy this movie, but I also don't know if I would recommend other people watch this movie. Those are just my immediate thoughts on this movie. I understand if you don't agree with me. Those are just my knee-jerk reactions to this movie. I do think that there are a lot of things to celebrate within the movie. There's some incredible performances, namely by Kirsten Dunst. Wow. And the use of sound in this movie, like I mentioned, loud AF, but done very purposefully and intentionally. I just don't know if I agree that they did this in a movie. More of my thoughts on Alex Garland's Civil War, a movie that I did not enjoy, but I think that's the point. Are they trying to say that Americans are so self-centered that it would take a movie, a cinematic version of the devastations of war on our home soil to get us to pay attention to what's going on? And if so, do we think that this format of storytelling is effective to get us to look outside of our bubble? I was so uncomfortable watching this movie, and I think that they really made an effort to put me in the space of being uncomfortable, because this movie inherently does not take a side. Like, if you are going into this movie thinking you're going to get some backstory on what led to the Civil War and the different divisions, if you're going to get flat out answers and descriptions about what's like left or right, this is not that movie. This movie, I think, makes a really critical decision to focus more on the photojournalists who are employed to document the Civil War. Our lead characters admit that their families don't even acknowledge that whatever is happening is going on. At one point in the story, they even visit a small town that is so business as usual, unlike anything that we've seen up until that point on their road trip from New York to Washington, D.C. There has been utter chaos, flat out warfare going on in the streets, and we come across a small town that's just like, yeah, we just try to stay out of it. What I found really remarkable about this movie is it never succumbs to the easy explanation of what is right or what is wrong or how we even got to this point. What this movie does is it puts you in the space of the journalist that you are following. All of our protagonists are journalists who pride themselves on their objectivity, and our main character, Lee, has suffered so much from just being the person capturing these horrific images that she has inherited a lot of trauma. And visually, we can see that in the lens flares that occur around her when she's trying to get in the zone. We even see her character succumb to some sort of panic attack when they are in the height of combat. There's so much distance that is created in this movie between what is happening and us, the viewer, because we are seeing the experience through these objective journalists. So you are not only removed from making an opinion as a journalist, there's that other layer of distance as I am just watching what they want me to see. And the movie itself is trying to be objective, which is really frustrating, and I don't know if they entirely accomplish that or if that's the point, because it's hard to sit in that objectivity when what we are seeing are such horrendous acts of evil. Even actress Kirsten Dunst talks about the PTSD she experienced from production of this film alone. So imagine the experience of watching this. I understand the role of objectivity, especially in journalism. It's so that journalists can establish a sense of connection and trust with the public. They are a public service. However, when we are watching objectivity in a movie, which we can argue, does that even exist? It feels like this movie altogether is way ahead of its time and like way too late. So what are we doing? So I understand this movie is trying to be objective, but I also feel like it suffers the same fate of like political satire. Historically, political satire has not been able to effectively communicate criticism where criticism is due, because both sides of a political spectrum can look at the same piece of satire and think, wow, the other person or the other side in this case is really dumb or really funny. Like, it fails to convey some actual commentary on what is going on. And in that case, both sides leave scot-free thinking that this was satirizing the other's intentions. At the end of the day, I think I understand what this movie was trying to achieve. I just don't still see the justification for making it. Let me know what you thought of Civil War, if there are things that I'm just missing in what it was trying to tell. I'm really curious to know if other people had different experiences. In a world steeped in denial, what is the role of a journalist or a photojournalist that is being objective and trying to document the truth of what is happening? What is the truth? And what is the role and the ultimate purpose of the protagonist in Alex Garland's 2024 film Civil War? Spoilers if you haven't seen the movie. The more I think about this movie, the less I think that it's actually thematically hollow, and it's actually like a social experiment in which we are trying to practice objectivity in the face of atrocity, and it's just really hard to accomplish. And we see that task through the lens of these two characters. Speaking of lens, there's a lot of overlap in the vocabulary when we talk about photography and we talk about story, perspective, exposure, framing. In the film, we don't get a lot of backstory about our protagonist, but we do know that Lee is an award-winning photojournalist, so she is seen a lot. A foil for Lee's character is Jessie, a new photographer who is very young in her career and is just starting out. We learned a little bit about their origins. Jessie is from Missouri and Lee is from Colorado, and that actually helps them out when they're communicating with an officer who's gone a little off. And where they're from matters because they both share that their families are able to be in complete denial of the existence of a civil war. Very quickly, I want to point out how their choice of camera is an extension of their character and how they approach photography. I believe Jessie is using a Nikon F3 film camera from the 80s. A film camera is going to be inherently slower than a digital camera. This is not a disadvantage, but it's just a different method to taking photos. You're going to have to wind the roll yourself every time you take a photo. You're winding the roll. There's no autofocus, so she has to be very intentional with her framing. And because she has less capacity to take thousands of photos, she's not using digital memory cards, she's using rolls of film. She has to be very intentional with the photos she's taking. And I think this speaks to her inexperience. It helps her slow down and be more in the moment. And there's even a palpable sense that this is an extension of her. At one point, she uses her own body to help warm up her developer when she's developing negatives. And it feels like the film is more connected to her and it has more of a tactile feel than the mechanical digital camera. Then Lee has a digital camera. It's a Sony Alpha, and she's using these telephoto lenses, meaning she can get really close without physically being so close. She has memory cards, so she can store thousands of images very easily, and she can take photos a lot more quickly. Because a digital camera can process photos a lot quicker, you can see them in your viewfinder instantly. I think this is an extension of her being able to just see images for what they are and store them away and just bury that trauma. There's that vocabulary overlap again. We think about exposure in your career, exposures on film. The exposures that Jessie are taking are a lot slower. It takes her a lot longer to see them because she has to physically develop them, whereas Lee can see them instantly. It's almost like they have to go against their own humanity in order to be objective in the scenarios that they find themselves in. Like, it goes against your biological predisposition to care for other people, to just objectify them and take these photos. I feel like there is something to say about representation because Lee has been able to do that for so long, but when we get to the beginning of the film, when she meets Jessie, she decides to intervene and save Jessie because she sees herself in her, a young photographer. She decides to step into the action and actually stop Jessie from meeting her end. We can even go so far as to think of Jessie being the beginning at the end for Lee, or her rise in humanity. She exposes her to a part of her humanity that she thought had died, but because she sees so much of her in Jessie, and she is seeing photography through her eyes now and seeing the experiences of what it can do for someone who isn't hardened and isn't used to witnessing these horrific events, she is now having a crisis of self. And you can even see that being very deliberately displayed to us in the ending of the film, where Lee decides to put her body into the action, making her a subject in Jessie's photo. I find it interesting that Jessie even starts taking photos of the crew themselves, and she even asks Lee to pose for her at one point, making her a subject. I think it's fighting Lee's natural instinct to dehumanize the people around her so that she can be a photographer. And I think that there is something to say about the dehumanization that has to go into being objective in these scenarios. But to what end is all of this for? Like, what are they taking the photos for? If there are people who are able to sit in comfort and in denial and not even acknowledge the atrocities going on, and even if they are able to change someone's mind, what would come of that?